Not long after Big Bubba became your bodyguard, he debuted a new move called the Bubba Spike. It appeared Bubba was going for a power bomb, but botched it and hurt one of the Mulkey brothers. The move was never used again. How did the Bubba Spike come about, and was it a botched power bomb?
Well, as I recall it, and I'd have to watch the tape to see, but I believe it was going to be like just he picked Bill Mulkey, I believe it was, up in a reverse bear hug. So Bill's head was facing down. He was upside down. And he was either going to drop to his knees or he was going to drop sitting. And it could have sort of been a sit-out power bomb, but he wasn't really putting him to. Anyway, the point is, he told me and Bill both, he said, hey, I got to, because he was just thinking of shit. Now, I mean, he had literally had 15 matches only at this point, if that. He'd had a few on TV, and Dusty kept him off for a couple months and he gave him the gimmick. So he was doing a lot of this stuff on TV for the first time ever, because you didn't have training classes or schools or places to practice in those days. So we went over it, and the way he described that he was going to do it, I blessed, because I was the veteran. All of Bubba's stuff, really, I kind of helped him set up his early matches, making him a movie monster and having him do different things. Like, once again, he could kick as high as his head, and he was 6'6". So I'd have him do the deal where he'd stand in front of the guy and just suddenly loop his foot up and kick the guy in the side of the head, and the guy would go down. Boom. It was abrupt and sudden from a guy that size. Or he'd go to shake the guy's hand, but he would reverse arm whip him the other way backwards into the turnbuckle or whatever. He's like a movie monster. Anyway, I blessed this one because it sounded like it would work. And Bill knew how to take it, and everything was great. But what we didn't realize, apparently, according to what happened later when Bill woke up, was that Bubba was so heavy, because he weighed like 350 or better at that point. When he dropped with all that weight, one of the boards flew up in the ring and hit Bill in the back of the head. So the move didn't actually knock him out as much as the ring in the back of the head did, which wasn't originally thought to be part of the equation. So anyway, he's goofy, right? And they get him back to the back, and Bubba's standing there, and he's kind of, hovering over, like worried about him. And I think Randy, is Bill's brother's there, trying to squeeze his hand, and they're slapping him around and everything. And that's when Dusty came in, and he cut the promo on. It looked like he was putting his finger in Wee Willie Wilkins' face, except he was looking up at Bubba. And he was like, don't do shit you don't know how to do. Don't do shit you don't know how to do. And made sure Bill woke up and turned around and walked off. And Bill told him later on, "Oh, it wasn't your fault, man. It just that board hit me or whatever the fuck, blah, blah, blah. It's just the way." But that move was never tried again. He didn't want to take that fucking ass chewing again. And it registered Dusty. If Dusty thought a guy, especially a new guy that he's given that big of an opportunity to, was doing shit irresponsibly, or that he didn't know how to do, or it was dangerous, or was abusing the guys. And I mean, that didn't happen often, that he would say lighten up, but it was abusing one of the beloved job guys. He would say something. He didn't care who it was. He was the boss. And Bubba did not want to piss Dusty off. And I mean, they were fine after that, but it was just like Bubba, he was horrified, because that was the first time he ever hurt anybody, because he'd only had 15 fucking matches, and most of them had been 3 minutes long.
You know Bubba, you know Dusty. It's 1989. The Big Boss Man just comes off this major program with Hulk Hogan, and Dusty comes into the WWF, and they program him with Bubba, with the Boss Man. What do you think he thought about that at the time?
Oh, I'm sure he loved it. I can't remember whether he specifically said something to me at that, because I mean, we talked not often, because back then you didn't have cell phones, and he's in the WWF on the road and I'm in WCW on the road or whatever. But Bubba definitely called me the week that he fucking got his check from the fucking Garden, taking a superplex off top rope for Hogan. That was a $12,000 week in 87 or whatever.
89.
89. Okay. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, no, he loved working with Dusty, and Dusty always had loved him, or else he wouldn't have given him that spot and that push. And I mean, also the first night at the Great American Bash in Charlotte in 86, at the Memorial Stadium in front of that huge crowd, we had the cage match with me and Bobby and Dennis against Dusty and Magnum and Baby Doll. And then that's where they shot the first angle with him and Bubba, where after Baby Doll beats me, right? And they're screaming and yelling, and somehow we get out of the cage, but I'd have to watch the tape again. But Bubba gets Dusty out on the floor, and we slam the door, so Magnum's stuck inside, and Bubba's supposed to get some heat on Dusty on the stadium floor, and Dusty's like, just beat me up, Bubba. Just beat me up, right? Beforehand. That's the only instruction you got. You just get some heat on me. Just beat me up. So Bubba gets Dusty down on his knees in front of him, and he's got his left hand grabbing Dusty by the hair, and he's just throwing punches. And Dusty likes to sell on his knees and put his arms out like that, right? Like he's kind of on the cross, and he's bleeding. You get the people with him. But in this case, it's the first angle Bubba's ever done. And there are legitimately almost 25,000 people in Memorial Stadium. And literally, Bubba's 4 months from his first match and doing jobs on Atlanta TV in front of fucking 50 people in the studio. We heard every single punch that landed on Dusty's forehead. Bubba's bare fist just that's what it said. And Dusty's not got his arms out selling like he's on the cross like he does in the ring. Normally his arms are flying up in the air with every shot because it hurts, and he's, oh God. Oh, geez. Oh, God. Oh, God. But that was okay because people believed it, right? Dusty believed it. And he knew he had something with this guy, and he wanted to get him over and make an opponent, because Dusty could draw money with Flair as in a single match because that was for the world title. And he could draw money in tag team matches against the combinations of the Horsemen or the Midnight Express. But when you think about it, and Dusty and Tully had some good matches, but Big Bubba Rogers was handmade from scratch to be an opponent for Dusty Rhodes, the ultimate babyface, because he is the guy that didn't sell anything for anybody, hardly even the Road Warriors. And he backed up from nobody, and Dusty put him over with breaking the chairs over his head and all the shit that he was told not to sell. Dusty handmade an opponent from scratch that had almost never even been in the wrestling business before, and turned him into, and he put him with us, frankly, because riding with the Midnight Express, having me lay out his matches and do his talking for him. Within a year, he was main eventing Crockett's Towns against Dusty and drawing record houses in one of the most crowded talent fields in history, including that house. Bruno Sammartino did not draw any more people to the Pittsburgh Civic Arena than Dusty and Bubba in that bunkhouse final in '87 did, because the fire marshal cut the people off and turned them away. It was 16,600 and whatever. You couldn't get any more people in the building. And that's with a guy that had been a pro less than a year. And Bubba deserves a ton of credit because he was like a sponge. He soaked everything up. He was an athletic freak. Even though he wasn't cosmetically pleasing, they found a gimmick that made it work. And I always thought that Big Bubba Rogers was, even though big people know him as the Big Boss Man, and he made that work too. And it was even more true to life, but it was just a little shinier and not as fucking. But Big Bubba to me was just a badass. He just really was, and he got that thing over so good, and he didn't have to speak. He could if he hadn't left Crockett and kept that gimmick, he could have tied the Sheik for never speaking English in public, and it would have worked, because you didn't want Big Bubba Rogers to speak, especially with Bubba's voice. It wouldn't have fit the part, and he didn't need to.